Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's panel, Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Adoption, What's Missing? My name is Sanja. I'm the VP at Utrust. And we're going to welcome our guests in a minute. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. But first of all, welcome to all the people who are joining in live stream as well. And I wanted to thank Microsoft and Startup Braga for hosting us today. So maybe ladies first, you can introduce yourself briefly and your company.
Thank you.
Your mic is working already.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I think you just need to speak a bit loudly. Yeah, louder.
Okay, do you hear me? Perfect. Thank you very much, Sanja. My name is Kristina Cornèr. I'm Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Cointelegraph. So basically, my work is to communicate all the innovations that we find, all these wonderful things that different projects are creating all over the world, to the people. And sometimes it's not only just communicating, but also translating to some simple languages. So my passion is communication, my passion is translating from languages of different people, innovations, and visionary projects.
Hello, my name is Justin Wu. I'm one of the co-founders and the COO of BetProtocol. BetProtocol lets anyone in this room actually, launch an online casino with us in less than 4 weeks. And we provide the whole tech stack and all the technological solutions that you'll need in order to make that a reality. And we provide the backend, the blockchain integration, and all of the games as well.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Celso Martinho. I've been with the internet in Portugal for more than 20 years. Now I'm the CEO of BrightPixel. BrightPixel is an incubator and an investor in early stage startups. We mostly look for B2B startup ideas, and blockchain and decentralization is one of the verticals we're looking for. So we're trying to find good project ideas that we can help build and later invest if they get there.
Pedro Vieira. I now work with 500 startups, one of the most active angel or early stage investment funds in the world. So we have a very large portfolio of companies. We are vertical agnostic, so we invest also invest in crypto, and we are one of the investors in Utrust.
Everybody, my name is Paulo Trezentos, and I am CEO and co-founder of Aptoide. Aptoide is an alternative app store. We have around 60 million ago, and we propose ourselves to develop a standard for the in-app building inside the apps using blockchain and using Ethereum. That there could be a standard in the industry for all the app stores besides Google and Apple. And now what we are doing is bootstrapping the ecosystem between the developers that need to integrate that standard. Our store, in Oppo, Vivo, Xiaomi, use apps within apps.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. So I just wanted to kick off by talking about adoption. So there's a lot of hype about mass adoption. When is adoption happening? So in your own fields for blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies, where do you think we are in terms of adoption? And how do you measure it? What is a good indicator for you of, the adoption rate? Anyone can start, yeah.
Well, I think you have a lot of proven use case for blockchain adoption in gaming. Definitely, you have very popular platforms that are live today that have been live for years that integrate blockchain or crypto in some aspect. I think it is a very good use case, especially for the online gaming industry. There are many problems in the online gaming industry, as I'm sure you well know. And blockchain can actually be a tool that brings a lot of transparency and fairness to the online gaming industry, which essentially right now is very opaque. So when you look at things like deposits and withdrawals, having that managed by a smart contract that is open source, that has been audited, that other people can see that is fair in how that operates. And when you also look at provably fair gaming, which is a new vertical in online gaming, where you have provably fair algorithms, where the user is able to put his user seed and also the server seed, and both of them go together in an algorithm to create the outcome of the RNG, so you know that, hey, you know, like this game is not rigged. These things are avenues for user adoption, and we've seen a lot of traction in this area. Blockchain and gaming, I think, go hand in hand, not only on the gambling side, but other innovative use cases, such as esports betting. We're seeing a lot of really exciting projects coming out of that area as well. So BetProtocol does provide casino, and also we're going into esports gaming too. And you know, we're really excited because it's one of these things that we've seen a lot of adoption already. You see a lot of volume, and a lot of actual users are going in there and having fun and spending their time. And I think this is one of the key things that we need to focus on. Less so much on the technology and how great this scaling solution is or how awesome this interoperability project is. Those things are great as well, but I think in order to get over the chasm between the early adopters and the early innovators, we need to start building things that are fun to play, that are easy to onboard, and you know, focus on bringing value to the end user.
Thank you.
So maybe I can be the bad guy and give the B2B perspective. I think we're still a long way before talking about adoption. To be completely honest, I think we went from the hype phase. We're now living the valley of death phase of the growing of the ecosystem. But I think we all agree that blockchain has a lot of potential. But there are still a lot of problems to be solved. A few of them were mentioned, but there's scalability problems. There's usability problems, and there's technology problems that still need to be used in order for us business people to build applications that can stand, the size of real world problems. And so I think the valley of death phase is actually good news, because it allowed a lot of bad projects and a lot of projects that didn't make any sense to be cleaned out of the ecosystem, and also allowed the ones that are building products that matter with substance, like the case of Utrust and many others, to be completely focused on the problems and advanced with the development of their products. And when the time comes, we don't know if it's going to be next month or in 2 years or 3 or 5 years. But when the time comes, those who survive and have been working and focused on their products will be the ones to thrive, and will be in a very competitive position against the others. So I think it's good news, but we're still far from adoption, I would say. Always saying that.
But just to make it clear. But no, I agree with you. And people, I think my biggest issue with blockchain has been that people forget that users, clients, they don't buy technology. They buy a solution to a problem. And as you're saying, it's not, there's not enough rich use cases right now. I think that people perceive the value in the solution to lead to that mass adoption that we would like to see. A lot of the use cases are super cool, but they're probably not in the biggest markets where they could be. And partially maybe because the markets where the solution could actually add a lot of value, example logistics, super old, hard to disrupt, and are still not ready to actually embrace something like blockchain.
Yeah.
I agree. I would like just to complement saying that the technology with the 2000 bubble burst is, of course, a temptation, because we remember what happened. And when I look to the chasm and thinking about the peak and the chasm, and now, of course, natural selection, as Celso was saying, it's good. Natural selection is what drives us to here. But after the 2000 bubble burst, there were good projects that died. So not only the bad projects died. So what I like to look back is understand what the good projects that died could have been done to overcome this phase, right? Because that's what we are surviving until it becomes.
How do you know they were good projects?
Because they were exactly the same as others that have had success. Of course, everybody knows the Amazon case. So before the bubble, it gets along the bubble, and then it's what is today. And about those projects and what was the model? And I believe that low spending, product market fit, getting a marathon instead of a sprint was the formula. I don't know if it will be 10 years or 7 years like the 2000 bubble burst, but we have to be ready.
I still think that we actually passed that state of being just hype industry. In 2 years, I've seen like a radical change among people who are interested in blockchain or are interested in what I'm doing, and they were asking, so what are you doing? Blockchain? Now it's not the same. So a lot of big giant companies are experimenting with crypto and blockchain. Actually, every sector has already its use cases. In my opinion, the adoption comes when we actually don't see that we have the technology in our life. So it's something that we don't feel as a new thing. Like we don't tell, oh, you see, I'm having a smartphone. Do you know what is it? So the same with blockchain and crypto, in my opinion. And another point I would like to make is that the real adoption comes when we have enough engineers to work on the technology. Now the fracture of blockchain engineers out of the overall number is like several hundred thousands out of several billions. So that's the scale. More engineers we have that are involved in the blockchain projects, more people who are working on convergence of blockchain with other technologies, of course, more adoption we will have with a geometrical progression.
Thank you, great insights. So you all mentioned some bottlenecks for adoption, scalability, usability, user experience, and I completely agree with all of that. So what do you think needs to happen for us to, overcome this obstacle? And once that happens, where do you think there will be major disruptions by blockchain and cryptocurrencies in the different fields and industries?
Okay, maybe I can start. So I think that we're all waiting for a period in time where there's a lot of convergence. Not only the scalability, usability, security, which are mostly technology-related problems, are solved. But we also need, the real products working. In the case of business, we need regulation, or at least some definition of the guidelines that we can operate with. That's really important when you're looking for applications in the realm of businesses. Not so much with crypto coins, it depends, but on business applications, that's really important. I think that what we need to do right now is keep working, to be honest. I know it's a cliche, it's a simple answer, but I think it's what needs to be done. And another thing that I think companies like Utrust are trying to do, and I think it's a good idea, is to find ways to build the products without all of the technology-related problems to be solved right now. So there's a lot of hacks going on.
Thank you for promoting us.
I'm betting that most successful applications in the scene of blockchain today are using a lot of off-chain technology and not really blockchain technology. But that's what they need to do in order to get through this phase. When the scalability problem gets solved, they will be there before the others, and then the magic will happen.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with education, of course, telling people what blockchain is, the people that don't know, and also to, I guess, get more social proof in the sense of pulling legacy firms and people, when I say legacy, I mean non-blockchain firms, and get them into the blockchain space by allowing them to play around with the technology and build value around it as well. I think I see a lot of analogies with the rise of the sharing economy. And when I say sharing economy, I see things like Airbnb and Uber. And when they first came out, these things were really obscure, but then they become suddenly ubiquitous. Why? Because some new technology came by and it totally disrupted what was mature industries. So like in the Airbnb example, you have a really mature industry, which is the hotel industry, being totally disrupted by the fact that you now have a website where people can leave reviews and it's like integrated payment processing and all that stuff. So you now trust some random stranger to come into your house and rent, to other people. Same thing with Uber. The rise of mobile phones. Everyone had internet on the mobile phone. Led to the rise of the disruption of the public transportation industry, which I think we're going to see a lot of that happening, kind of piecemeal with blockchain. In very mature industries, like gaming, like payments, and suddenly you're going to see a lot of people using, XYZ app, and it's going to be blockchain based, but the end user is not going to care that it's like based on blockchain or uses crypto. They're going to care because it adds value to their life. It's something cool. Everyone's talking about it. It becomes part of the new zeitgeist. And in order for that to happen too, you also need to have education and evangelists like all the people in this room that are out there that are in the streets that are saying, hey, have you heard of blockchain and this like this? Everyone's heard of the 80-20 rule, which is like maybe 20 people like influence or do 80% of the work or influencing in a certain network. I like to think of the lesser known rule, which is the 80-20 of the 80-20 rule, which is like the 20% of the 20%, or like the around 4% of the people are like these super passionate, super influencer type people. And I think that a lot of the people in this room fit in this criteria. And I think it's up to us to really be the standard bearers out there and to provide value where we can.
On the challenges, I fully agree with UI UX. We have to improve a lot. I also want to share a surprise that I have in our experience. I read Chris Bernick and other guys that are talking about blockchain is good not only for payments and so on, but to align incentives in the industry, right? And it seems so obvious. Of course, if A does not trust B, you can use the blockchain as a proof. It's obvious. But when we go to the field and talk with Chinese OEMs in Shenzhen, developers in Helsinki, it's not so obvious. Even if it's in their interest, sometimes we are not tweaking the incentives or we are not tweaking the proofs in the right impactful way for them. And that's is taking a lot of time for us. We see there the potential, because sometimes we are not expecting. It says, oh, that's not a problem. I know that's in blockchain, the transaction, so I trust. Or I run. Cafe Bazaar is the largest app store in Iran. 40 million monthly active users. Iran is a 70 million country, so it's more than half of the country. It's impossible for us to integrate directly with them because there are a lot of limitations on payments and so on. So they said, can we fork your wallet? Yes, you can. Just need to follow the protocol and use the protocol to share with developers and the OEMs. You can do it. So we were not expecting how they thought about it, but it makes all the sense. But that's incentive alignments. But sometimes it's not where you are expecting, and it takes time. Exactly what the players are expecting.
I would add that communication is very important in our industry. We are already, in my opinion, very much ahead of the traditional conservative industry, because we really can communicate between founders, and that's incredibly insightful and useful for further development of projects, of ideas, because like traditional banks are like, in order to talk to somebody who really makes decisions, you have to really pitch, calm, bureaucratic months of get a message delivered. In our industry, it's quick, as all the communications we manage. But at the same time, I think the bottleneck is that there are a lot of people who have the ideas, have implemented something, who maybe came from another background, not blockchain, and that gives a lot of more interesting insights into the industry. But at the same time, we really miss people who are specialized in blockchain. And I would agree that education is one of the things that needs to be focused for the years ahead, because we really need to have people who have their minds already focused on the implementation of the blockchain technology.
Final user with the developer or the creator of the solution. To me, sometimes it feels like blockchain is getting in the way of blockchain, because we get so bogged down of explaining how it works and why it's safe and why it's good. What we should be doing is working on products that work seamlessly, and the final consumer, final user doesn't know, it doesn't care if it's blockchain powered or not. And so I think that is the barrier that you need to overcome. Get out of this world of feeling that we're super cool because we're working on blockchain. We're not. We shouldn't be working on blockchain. We should be working on usable solutions for the founders.
Thank you.
And it was the same with the internet in the 90s. We were all talking about technology, and suddenly everyone had a browser at home. Process.
So despite the fact that we said awareness is growing of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and more corporations are also entering the space, more investors, however, there is a rising number of companies failing as well, as we said. So why do you think that's happening? And do you think that has a high impact on public perception as well?
All technologies go through this cycle of iteration, of failure. Obviously, it's harder when it's something that can be as fundamental as a payment system, right? And so in some applications, some use cases, failure is but I think it's just part of the process. I don't think blockchain is any different than work, or before that, trying to get telephony to work. It's just
failing is actually can be a good thing, because either you're cleaning the bad stuff out of the ecosystem, or you're training the entrepreneurs to go to the next start and be more successful. So, and there's no other way. You cannot teach an entrepreneur to be successful at first time. So I think it's good. We're maybe still cleaning the ecosystem out of so many projects that got terribly funded during the hype phase, maybe. But other than that, it's completely normal. It happened the same with the web and other disruptive platforms.
Yeah, I completely agree with Pedro and Celso. Over 90% of startups fail. It's the truth. But at the same time, we are working on, with every failure, we actually are approaching to this new model of business making, management strategy that, of course, needs also to be modified for when a new technology comes to the business.
Yeah, and when you're in kind of a tough bear market like this, or either in crypto or outside of crypto, some of the largest and most successful companies were founded in the worst market conditions. And the people that are able to raise and to make it in these terrible conditions are the ones that, when the market comes back, really gain a lot of market share, because they've made their bones. They understand how hard it is, and when conditions are better, there's a saying that fortunes are made in the crash. And why is that? Because if you're in a position, you're able to buy assets and grab market share when they're really cheap. So I think it's difficult, but the people that are in a good position are also the ones that reap most of the benefits.
Unfortunately, it's not failures that make damages for the industry. It's rather scammers, and unfortunately, we had a lot of scammers in the industry in the beginning. That is maybe a part of also every new technology that comes to the market. I would say that now we have much less scams ICO and other projects. So
I
we're
would
moving.
also add that if you read traditional media, you might get a sense that everyone's failing in blockchain right now. But if you're into the community and actually are looking at the ones that are surviving and building stuff right now, there's a lot of interesting projects being built, a lot of substance. So I wouldn't say that right now the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and startups in the blockchain is failing. I wouldn't agree with that.
I just compliment, I agree with everything you said, but nevertheless it's depressing. We have to admit it, right?
The price of Ethereum is depressing.
It's depressing. And see a project that we believe falling down is depressing. So, but at those times, what I remember is pioneers like back in 2009, Satoshi, which is also Satoshi. No, I'm just kidding. You're Satoshi. And by these days, everyone is Satoshi. But the pioneers had, of course, a lot of merit in what we are now today. But back in the web and the bubble burst, the guys that stay with the technology, that stood with the technology, have also a lot of merit on ourselves today, ordered from Amazon or paying through PayPal and now Utrust. But they have also merit. So sometimes when I'm starting to get depressed with good projects that are falling, I'm just thinking that today, people like us that discuss, promote, educate, build are the ones that will make the success that in 2 years' time, in 1 year time, in 5 years' time would be so obvious, and today is sometimes difficult to see. So we have to be encouraged by the previous examples and keep going.
Great. I have some more questions here, but I wanted to maybe open questions to the public. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand. Maybe I can give you my mic.
Hi everyone. Jack. I actually run my own blockchain project as well, Discussions.app. We are built on top of EOS blockchain. And throughout the whole conversation, I heard all these arguments before, but one of the things that keep popping up in the back of my head is maybe, I think you guys are right. Like we're putting too much into trying to build products on top of the blockchain. And for me, one of the most amazing thing about Ethereum and like the ICO craze was that there were projects popping out everywhere in terms of people who were, for better or worse, who weren't able to get funding before now have the ability to get funding. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs from Venezuela. There was no way in hell we could have funded those projects or helped those projects. But because of the blockchain, because of this innovation, financial innovation, we were able to help them grow the project. We helped them build out their equity system. Now, obviously, that's a very tricky legal area. And I was wondering if that is something that you guys think is holding the market back a little bit, is stopping from the investors among you guys, or you guys don't want to get into the legal complexity of funding a token project with individuals from countries that might have restrictions from you funding them. So.
Everything in the investment process starts with the trust between the individuals. No matter if the equity is being traded by cash or by crypto. So we at the team and we do due diligence. The regulatory aspect is obviously a challenging one. So we'll do types of diligence on crypto or blockchain companies because we need to ensure that our funds that were trusted to us by our LPs are going to be deployed by way. And so there what we can do because of that. Where is the entity established? What type of entity is there a foundation and a corp, and how do they come together? And so all of that matters, but really at the end of the day is we need to trying to build and why they're trying to build it, and if we believe in that, if we're aligned with that, then we'll.
What if they build the business that's outside the blockchain and they only use the structure of the equity in terms of paying out dividends, that kind of stuff?
Well, then I think that gets trickier in that it may have implications for us when the liquidity event comes. To make sure that if we invest, we're able to get to liquidity event whenever we feel like we need to exit, for example. That the way that equity is being stored in some entity, as you're describing, doesn't have any detrimental impacts on us fiscally. I mean, it gets trickier the more deeper you get. It's illegal in a tax due diligence, but that follows the individuals.
But I think it all goes down to what you said initially, which is trust and due diligence of the projects, right? Because you can get scammed by a traditional investment in a non-token startup, right? It's the same, right? And I think the ICO craze that we went through the last, 2-3 years wasn't that good because there was no due diligence and no accountability for many projects. And we still haven't learned how to do that. But I think, decentralized investment in startups will come back. But it will probably come back with a layer of, I wouldn't say regulation, but at least accountability and more due diligence to the projects that you're financing. But I'd say that it will come back. We'll see traditional investors trying to do the same as any investor doing an ICO or using tokens with a startup.
I'll take one more question from the crowd. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. More than a question, actually, is a comment. I'm just quoting Pedro that says, people don't buy technology, they buy solution to problems. First, I don't completely agree with that. First, people do buy technology. They buy 8K television, although there are no contents that play on those television yet, and they spend thousands of dollars, euros, whatever, just because they want it. But except for that, I mean, blockchain is, of course, an infrastructure technology, sorry. But I think we're missing a point that blockchain is also the technology so far that could enable what is the revolution of the Web 3.0, and this is really revolutionary. I'm just making one example, the Brave browser. What the Brave browser does is incredible, and I think we should talk about that like every day. In the venue that just like a few hundred meters far from here.
You have a company that sells that product?
Sorry?
Are you pitching your product?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying like 50% of the people that Web Summit, they find themselves marketer, and most of them basically sell advertising. And what the Brave browser is doing with their with blockchain technology is basically disrupting for real this advertising industry. Just say, you know what, you can get a bit of what advertiser would get. And I think that if we just point on this kind of stuff, on this kind of messages, we can totally help mass adoption, because I think we just focus on supply chain. It's great. I mean, I want to know what my chicken life has been before getting in my sandwich, but that's not probably as revolutionary as, but just, I mean, that was my comment, sorry.
But, let me comment on your comment, because I think that you started by saying you're not going to talk about products and that it's all about technology, but what you described is solutions. People bought a better TV. The image is better, the experience and the sound is better. That's what they're buying. They're not buying the technology, right? The same thing with the browser. They're buying a better browsing experience.
I think we're discussing what we call technology, right?
Thank you. So we're running quite out of time, so I'm going to ask one last question. So for all the companies operating in blockchain and cryptocurrencies and all of us today, do you think that anything needs to radically change in order to push mass adoption further, if anything?
No, I think all the ingredients are here. It takes time, but there is no salvation, no eureka moments, no epiphany that we need. Work hard. Have resilience, because a lot of things will happen, but we are in the right track.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a split between, because we're talking about blockchain, but blockchain is a broad definition of many things. You can be talking about a decentralized application or a business application that's not so decentralized. Again, in the case of businesses, I think regulation and guidance should be more clear in order for products to come to the market. That would help. But I think we're working on that. Some countries are faster than others, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, and I do think it is, hashtag biddle, as they say, right? The common misspelling. That is definitely part of it, but I also think it's important to realize that like blockchain in the greater sense of the overall electronic, industry of technology, it's still relatively small. And I think what we see a lot in this like small boat that we have right now, you have a lot of tribalism and you have a lot of companies and people and different chains kind of trying to like fight each other and things like that. I think if we, of course, we need to call out the bad actors and the blatant scammers and things like that. But I think competition is good, and I think competition among people that respect each other is great as well. So I think it's a good thing. But I think maybe less tribalism and more cooperation. To try to say, the market is a lot bigger, instead of fighting each other, we should like look at the legacy industry, the non-blockchain industry, and just try to like absorb more of that and to make our pond grow into like a lake and then into an ocean. I think it's a much better road for us.
Yeah, I agree completely with everything that has been said. I would add maybe a point on communicating to people what every project is creating. Because as we said, it's not only technology, it's not only solution, it's also some vision of the future that we are trying to build all together. So sometimes it needs to be not only a word privacy, but we need to understand what is real privacy and to which extent do we want to have privacy in our lives. So it's not some abstract concept that is just coming together with the technology. It's a real thing that can be applied to your everyday life. So I think more discussions like this, thank you very much for the organization, more communications between businesses, B2B, B2C, governmental discussions, of course, because regulators now, in my opinion, are a bit frustrated by everything that is coming from the industry, and it doesn't sometimes understand what are the priorities, what is to be regulated first, later, what is something to be maybe wait a little bit for some other use cases before regulating that. And of course, communication between all the community, because in my opinion, what creates our future is our vision of it, and so our actions and our eyes and heads and hearts.
Thank you. They just told me that we have a few more time because drinks are not here yet. But wait, they're going to be here in 15 minutes, so I can allow for a few more questions from the crowd. Nuno.
Hi guys. Quick question. Do you think that government-issued digital currencies are positive or negative for the industry?
I think they can be both in the ways that they're implemented. I think it definitely is positive in the sense that even though Mark Zuckerberg went in front of Congress and got grilled by a bunch of congressmen, many of whom weren't so well informed, the fact of the matter is that the fact that that happened got blockchain into the public spotlight a lot more than if Libra had not existed. So I think a lot of people kind of look at Libra and they say, oh, well, it's centralized, it's not a real cryptocurrency, blah, blah, blah. But it could act as kind of like a quote unquote gateway drug into like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So in that sense, I think it is positive. It just needs to be implemented well in a way where we do have strong privacy guarantees for individuals, and implemented in a way where it doesn't turn into something kind of like a hall of shame, where everything that you do is then tracked on the blockchain and you can never escape what you've done in the past, et cetera, et cetera. Definitely with things like GDPR, where you have the right to be forgotten in certain circumstances, needs to be addressed. definitely. But it really all just comes down to implementation. It can be great in certain areas like, for example, what's going on in Argentina or Venezuela, where people are escaping the huge amounts of inflation in the Argentine peso by using DAI stablecoin. I think that's a really great implementation of that, but it really just comes down to how it's done.
Yeah, and related to, I mean, Libra is it's privately issued. I was more focused on
central government.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Central banks issuing
coin, yeah.
issuing digital the currency in the form of a digital currency on the blockchain.
Yeah,
China, Turkey, and all of them.
I completely agree with what was said. I think in regards to governments, the question should also include when, because I think in the future they will all digitally issue money. If we're talking about in 20 years or something like that, then probably everything will be digitally issued. The question is when they're going to do it, and what will be the impact of that to the rest of the ecosystem. And so it depends. If they begin to do that too early, that might have a negative impact of what's being done now by entrepreneurs in the blockchain area. It also depends on the implementation and many other aspects. So, but I think they all will come to a point where money will be digital and it will be based on probably something like blockchain. And that will come. Yeah. Yeah, but if it's going to be government issued, the incentives will be similar to the
to the fiat system. Yeah, it's true.
Oh, you get back.
I kind of agree with Italian. You're Italian, right? Our colleague that was talking about Brave token, a Brave browser. I think we are not talking about an adoption enough. Like what's missing? I think we are at the peak of adoption of crypto. We can't confuse the bear market with the current adoption, which is not as we want. It's not big as we want, but crypto is being adopted, and we are not talking about certain examples like NFTs. I think 2 weeks ago there was a NFT game that sold 6 million in NFTs, 6 million USD. Brave, it's an awesome example. Decentralized finance, I use it every day. We use exchanges. Obviously, we use centralized exchanges, but those exchanges have a part of decentralization, the addresses, if so. So my question is, what are your adoption examples? What are you seeing in terms of adoption? Like what are the projects that you are seeing that are being adopted in the market right now? That's what we should be talking, right? So can you give me some examples of the projects that you like?
Subcoins and Utrust, right?
That's I thought about it like putting like a note that you can't mention your own projects. That goes for you, Justin, as well. But yeah, do you have good examples of projects that you feel that are being adopted and can scale and grow in the future?
Well, like you said, the NFT craze I think is huge. Like being able to own a non-fungible token that really represents like a one digital asset that cannot be duplicated. I think it's huge, and we all know the popularity of trading card games. Magic the Gathering back in the day, and basically Gods Unchained would be my example of them doing like a blockchain version of that. And so like each card is an NFT, and people are buying and selling and trading these things. And also you have the gamification where each card has a different rule, and you battle with card battles and things. And I think they were very successful in their token sale because people wanted the cards, people wanted the rare cards, and they wanted to be able to play this game. And so again, I think gaming is a great use case for blockchain. So that would be my example.
I would prefer not to name projects, but I would like to name some industries which are particularly interesting for me in terms of adoption. Of course, it's healthcare, all the databases that are related to pharmacy and medical industry. Another big thing, in my opinion, is implementing blockchain to the green technologies. tokenizing carbon quotas. That is something that should be promoted for its social impact for our dear Earth. Another thing that, of course, is experimenting a lot with blockchain is luxury wine and all art, of course. The tracking use cases, are something that maybe are the most simple to implement. So that is something that sees more use cases now than other industries.
Yeah, just to add an answer to your question as well. So my background is completely different from blockchain and crypto. So prior to Utrust, I worked at eBay, PayPal, Vodafone. And in my role at Utrust, I communicate with large retailers and marketplaces in order for them to adopt crypto payments. So I can already see the shift that happened in the past 12 to 18 months, where retailers would not even listen or be open to adopt a cryptocurrency payment method, while now there is much more openness. So we are already integrated with larger retailers like Benfica, Phone House, and many, many more others coming. So I can already see, the difference in the perception. And at the beginning, it was more, for larger retailers, it was more a matter of being perceived as the pioneer, while now they really recognize the advantages for a merchant of processing cryptocurrency payments. So I can really see the shift in the past 12 months. Any other questions?
Hello. Celso, you just said in the more or less last comment that we are now seeing applications of blockchain and also technologies similar to blockchain in the business-to-business case, which I assume you are referring to DLTs, something like that. I have a feeling from a technological background that we are just, on the case of DLTs, business to business, we are just reinventing the wheel from 20 years ago because civil resistance and general algorithms that solve the Byzantine consensus problem already exist for 20 years and they were never used in the industry. At that time, the industry thought that running 3 or 4 replicas was a burden. It was unnecessary. And right now we are talking about running a blockchain to solve a problem that requires 2 or 3 replicas.
Sure.
This seems like a
waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to let you know, every time we go to a corporate and we start discussing use cases for blockchain, the exercise we like to do with them is try to convince them not to use blockchain, because they're all hyped out about doing something with the technology, just for the sake of understanding the technology.
Hearing that is very refreshing.
And in most cases, it doesn't make any sense. I completely agree with you. But the process of going through trying to convince them not to use blockchain is actually helpful, because it helps you find the right use case. Mm-hmm. And there are some use cases in which it makes sense to, for instance, use a consortium of validators, a private blockchain, for a specific problem where you have trust issues with some of your partners. Of course, if the use case is something where, for instance, you have a customer-company relationship that has no problems, no trust problems, then you absolutely don't need blockchain to solve anything there. It's just a waste of time. But I think that there are some interesting use cases that can be applied to businesses and private blockchains. And the same applies to public blockchains. We see completely decentralized ledgers like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and newer models like EOS or IOTA, where validation works completely different. And you can also discuss what's the point of it, right? So I think there are use cases for many applications, so it all depends on the context.
an important point, going back to our issue around like challenges, is that a lot of the issues we're facing now is that people are using blockchain for things that don't need it, and then it doesn't work, or it's not efficient, and then they feel like that then ends up working against blockchain. So it's really good to see that. Unless you need it.
No, it's more like if you tell them not to use, they will get shocked, and then they will go into a process of really thinking what the use case should be. Then you might find it.
I agree that we need process, and that is a process to understand the fit between the technology and the need makes sense. Sometimes we just have to be a little bit trustful, because remember that sending pet food over the internet in the bubble burst again was the stupid thing that everyone knew, because the logistics, the price of the shipping was more expensive than the food. But today I order the food from my pet through the internet. It works. So nobody knows if it takes 10 years or 1 year to work. So sometimes I just avoid just say no, does not make any sense, because sometimes it makes sense, not today but tomorrow, and people have to start with. But having this said, I fully agree with the process of trying to educate people that does not make sense.
Hi. This is, I guess, more of a question for Justin, just because you made the comment earlier, but if anyone wants to take it, please feel free to do so. You particularly mentioned that Libra coming into the space and, getting involved could benefit crypto, and it could, if anything, open certain avenues. In some cases, it can be argued that it's a bit of a double-edged sword, given the fact that it's Facebook and given the fact that it's a new space that's already difficult to get trust in. So what are your thoughts on someone saying that, for example? That it's double-edged.
I agree with you. I think there is a double-edged sword. I mean, you have the clear benefits and you have the clear drawbacks as well. I mean, benefits being that how many of you have the Facebook app installed on your phone right now, versus how many of you have, like, I'm probably talking to the wrong crowd, but if I went to the main stage on Web Summit, Facebook app installed on your phone versus MetaMask installed on your phone, probably people would be like, MetaMask, what is that, right? So I think having a cryptocurrency wallet, quote unquote, like already in your phone that's integrated with Facebook, would be a boon in the sense that it would get more people kind of aware of this area, like a more general audience, right? That's like not really into blockchain in the beginning. But on the other hand, Facebook is this company that has a ton of data. They got busted with the Cambridge Analytica thing, and they have a lot of abuses in terms of monetizing user data when they don't have permission to do that. I think it needs to be really clear about how that's going to be implemented. And I think in this particular case, probably of Libra, the dangers do outweigh the benefits in this area, just on the face of it. But the reason why I mentioned Libra before is just because the fact that Mark Zuckerberg was in front of Congress and had this big hearing that everyone was talking about, even on the mainstream news, I think that overall brought more attention to the space, and that was the point that I was trying to make.
So sorry, can I just follow that up with something? I personally found that a lot of the questions that they were asking, for people who don't know the technology, it can really confuse them. And if anything, it can increase negative press around the idea of blockchain and cryptocurrency and that whole world, because it is not necessarily an easy concept to simplify. So are there at all any concerns that it has actually, while it's been some press, it's actually been negative press? So do you see it as all press is good press, or should we be concerned for the space itself?
I think people need to also take some responsibility and also do research themselves and to understand these things. I think we live in a world where we're constantly bombarded by news, and I think the responsibility to go and figure out like what's real, what adds value to my life, what is fake news, is more on the person that's like absorbing that news. But if something is just like not even within your sphere of awareness, then it's just something that you won't even think about because it's not even in your universe, right? What I was saying before is that it suddenly like shined a light in an area where a lot of people weren't even looking at. And so as long as it like points them in that area, then they can begin the process of learning about that. And in that sense, it can be good. But of course, again, in the case of Libra itself, it really, because it's Facebook and because their history of abuses with user data, we really, really need to be careful with that. Yeah.
But I would like to add that Libra is not only Facebook. It's Libra Association that has different members. And that's also a case where we have a lot of big players that are involved into the industry. And from a point of a reporter, I would say that it's really very useful for promotion of the technology, because everybody is talking about all these companies who are involved into the project. And at least there are discussions, and it's only in discussing things that we can come to the truth.
There are pros and cons, but who is in favor of Libra can raise the arm?
What do you mean by
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Would like to see the rollout of Libra. It's good for the industry, and wish that Libra would roll out, would raise the arm. Thank you. Who is against it?
So you're against
There are also
and in favor.
I did not vote. I was there. It is 50-50, seeing from here.
Now ask the question, who likes Facebook?
Wait, who likes it? Who has?
There's also a discussion that crypto blockchain is not the US.
Dat was me af.
So there's way more things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things happening there.
I agree.
Just a question about cryptocurrencies issued by governments. Do you think this will bring too much transparency to governments? Because today, when euros are issued by the central banks, we don't know an accurate amount of fiat issued. It's a report that comes bi-monthly, and it's very vague. Where with cryptocurrency and blockchain, it's in real time. Everybody knows how much is issued out in the market, and this will change the way the news are spinned.
Well, again, it depends on the implementation. They can actually implement something that's not that transparent. So in theory, from what we know today, it could be a lot more transparent, secure. Incentives could be more well aligned, but it all depends on the implementation they'll be doing, I think. So I'm not sure. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I think there'll probably be different flavors of blockchain, like you had like intranets, and then you have the one internet that's all public. I think if you have governments like running their own coins, they probably want a permissioned blockchain system where they'd be able to control all the different aspects and run all the nodes for their own security and privacy. But I think if you have like, one country's coin wants to interact with another country's coin, they're going to have to use some sort of a public network that everyone agrees is like the decentralized, web that connects all of them in order to have interoperability. Because, if you just have one country's coin and nobody can buy it from a technical standpoint, or no one wants it, then because it's not connected to all the other ones, there's no liquidity. It's essentially useless. So I think, okay, yes, you're probably going to have I don't know, different country-specific coins on permission networks, but in order for them to really have value in an increasingly global marketplace, they're going to need to interact with a public chain. And I think in that public chain is where we're going to see a lot of value aggregation overall, since it's the commonwealth and the common ground for all of these different government coins.
And of course, petrodollar comes to mind.
I thought about it, and as I see, a very simple reasoning is that I believe in the technology, cryptographically. I don't believe in the government. So the technology running the government works for me, like e-vote, but the government running the technology does not work for me. So it's up to them. Is the technology running the government, or is the government running the technology with the flaws that Celso was saying that might happen, right?
Can I just ask a quick question. You guys talked about education and the role that it can play on the adoption of blockchain technology and crypto and digital currencies. Probably this question is more for Kristina, but you guys can also jump in. There is a great book from Nate Silver that's called The Signal and the Noise. How do you think that we can distinguish the good projects and the good content that a lot of companies are putting out there, and how you guys from different media outlets shows the kind of content that is put on the news, and how do you think that you can distinguish the good projects that are really doing their job from others that are obviously just trying to get awareness and all focus on the token and nothing else? So that's a question. How do you guys choose what to publish instead of just focusing on clickbait?
Very much for the question, Joe. It's true that we have a very high responsibility towards our readers, but we try, like, sometimes to risk, maybe, I would say from my personal perspective, than to conceal some piece of information, because in the end it's up to the people to decide. But at the same time, we need to always think how to present a project. Of course, we have anti-scam check before any project wants to enter our informational field. As soon as it entered, in my opinion, the new things are always better to present from the human point of view. Behind every project, there is a person. And it's more sincere towards the readers to talk about not the technology and the revolution this technology will bring, but what are the vision of the people who are behind the project, what they want to bring to the final clients, and what solution they want to try to present. And then it's up to us who are digesting this information to decide whether it's something that is interesting to follow or not. And I would also would like to thank you for the comment about regional news. It's true that we are tending to be focused on the news that are coming from the western part of the world, English speaking. And from the point of view of Cointelegraph, we're trying to get as many regional, local representatives in order to cover local news. That is very important, because it's true that sometimes we are somehow biased by what we can understand because of the language. So we have Korean, Japanese, Arabic language versions. My personal dream is a Chinese news desk. I think that more real contact with the projects through people who are creating them, more trust it will build in the industry. So it's not just writing about the project. It's talking to people, communicating with them, understanding their point of view, what they want to bring to the future of humanity, or maybe less revolutionizing something, just what solution they want to implement. And everything will be good. Just be always cautious, of course, and make your life yourself, not being followed by any media or Facebook or any other source.
Hi, can I have a last question maybe? Paul from Public Mint. I would like to hear your views in regards to your experience. So we all know that Bitcoin is around like 11 years already, and we all know that central banks were keeping an eye on Bitcoin just to see where it goes. So they were having this position of wait and see. Now we have Calibra, Facebook Calibra, whatever we call it. My question to the panelists is, would you foresee a scenario in the coming years where you have this balance between central banks and corporate currencies, or would the central banks overcome that and keep the sovereignty of each state by issuing digital currencies?
Yeah, so I think in order to answer that, I remember a key exchange between Congressman Brad Sherman, who's a notorious anti-blockchain congressman in the United States, and Mark Zuckerberg, where he questioned Libra, saying essentially that if a corporation that's as powerful as Facebook creates what is essentially its own money, this would negatively affect the United States' ability to exert its influence overseas in a way that's non-military, in a way that doesn't involve guns, but in a way that is, a threat of violence anyway. Use our token or our US dollar or else. Is essentially what that is. And so he was pretty plain about it. He said, like, look, these corporate tokens or coins or whatever, with a company that's as big as Facebook, do represent a real threat against sovereign nations and their fiat currencies if these networks are powerful enough. So I think it really was a wake-up call for these central banks and a lot of these fiat currencies that realized that, okay, Bitcoin was created 10 years ago. It's now a household name. But in terms of really, really threatening the status quo of the petrodollar or the SWIFT messaging system or like any of these really ingrained payment systems, it hasn't gotten there yet. But I think when they saw Libra, they all of a sudden got scared and they realized what the game is, and that they have some stiff competition now. So I think that would be the answer.
Thank you, everyone, and all the speakers for participating. It was really interesting for me to moderate this panel. I learned a lot. Thank you, everyone watching us live stream. So now we have some time for networking. So if we want to move outside, we can have some drinks, and there's food as well, I think. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.